Picture this, you're walking through the streets of Rome in the year 67 AD. The city is alive with the noise of traders, politicians, and soldiers. Then, a hush falls over the crowd as the emperor himself, Nero, steps into view. At his side walks a stunning figure, draped in silks and glittering jewels. To the casual observer, this appears to be his new wife, an empress to rival all others in beauty. But among the citizens, whispers rise like smoke in the air, for they know the unsettling truth. That elegant young woman was once a boy named Spore, and what Nero did to him stands as one of the darkest stories of abuse and obsession ever recorded in history. This isn't just another tale of Roman excess. It's a story of how unchecked power can twist love into obsession, turn grief into madness, and erase a person's identity until all that remains is a shadow of someone else's fantasy. Sporus may not be a name you've heard before, but once you know his story, it will be impossible to forget. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to go back to Nero himself, the man at the center of this nightmare. Nero wasn't born a tyrant. In fact, when he became emperor at just 16 years old, many Romans believed they were witnessing the dawn of a golden age. He cut taxes, supported public entertainment, and even performed on stage, delighting the crowd. For a time, he was adored by the people. But power has a way of corrupting. By the year 65 AD, Nero's mind had begun to unravel. Maybe it was the constant paranoia of ruling an empire where betrayal lurked around every corner. Maybe it was the isolation of being the only man in Rome who could never be contradicted. Or maybe it was because of the one person he claimed to love above all else, Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea was everything Nero wanted. Beautiful, ambitious, and politically shrewd, she dazzled him from the moment they met. Unlike his first wife Octavia, who was quiet and reserved, Poppaea was bold, witty, and commanding. She became the center of Nero's world, and soon his obsession. He divorced Octavia, married Poppaea, and smothered her with riches. Jewels from India, silks from China, perfumes from Arabia. Nero bankrupted the treasury to indulge her. He stationed guards around her not to protect her, but to control her. He had portraits and statues made so he could gaze at her even when she wasn't in the room. To Nero, Poppaea wasn't just a wife, she was an object of worship, the embodiment of all his desires. But Poppaea was not content to be silent or submissive. She argued with Nero, mocked his theatrical ambitions, and confronted him when he disappointed her. It was dangerous to defy an emperor, but Poppaea did not back down. And one night, in 65 AD, her defiance cost her everything. The details differ depending on which historian you read, but the outcome is the same. During an argument, possibly about his neglect of his duties or his obsession with performing, Nero, in a fit of rage, struck her. Poppaea was pregnant at the time, and the blow proved fatal. She and her unborn child were gone in an instant. For a man who commanded legions, who could order executions with a word, the reality was crushing. He had destroyed the one person he could not bear to lose. Overcome with grief, Nero's behavior grew increasingly bizarre. He had Poppaea embalmed rather than cremated, placed her in an elaborate tomb, and even declared her divine. He forced the court to act as if she were still alive, leaving her seat empty at banquets and punishing anyone who suggested he move on. It was in this atmosphere of grief and madness that Nero's eyes fell upon Sporus. Sporus was a teenager, likely no older than 14 or 15, who had been raised within the imperial household. Born a slave, but freed as a child, He had received an education and training for service in the palace. In many ways, his life was one of privilege compared to the masses of Rome. But privilege in the palace came with a price, complete dependence on the emperor's favor. What made Sporus stand out was not his intelligence or his skill, it was his face. Ancient sources tell us that Sporus bore an uncanny resemblance to Poppaea, particularly in the delicacy of his features and the shape of his eyes. To Nero, still consumed with grief, this resemblance was like a spark in the darkness. Here, he thought, was a way to bring Poppaea back. But Sporus was male. For most people, this would have been the end of the fantasy. For Nero, who saw himself as a god, it was a challenge to be overcome. He ordered his physicians to perform a brutal operation, altering Sporus's body to make him appear more feminine. This was not only a physical assault, it was the destruction of Sporus's very identity. He was forced into dresses and jewelry once worn by Poppaea. Tutors taught him how to walk, speak, and move like an empress. His hair was styled, his voice coached into softer tone, his every gesture scrutinized until the boy that had once been Sporus was gone. In his place stood Sabina, a living replacement for Nero's dead wife. Then came the wedding. In 67 A.D., Nero staged a grand ceremony, marrying Sporus in front of Rome's elite. It was a spectacle of flowers, lamps, music, and feasting. To outsiders, it looked like a royal wedding. But everyone who knew the truth saw something disturbing. The emperor had forced a boy to become a ghost of the woman he killed and now demanded the world accept it as real. After the wedding, Sporus lived as Nero's consort. He had a household staff, a retinue, even his own income. In public, he appeared at Nero's side as the Empress of Rome. But beneath the surface, it was a life of torment. Every day was a performance. Every glance, every word, every memory Nero conjured of Poppaea had to be answered as though Sporus truly were her. His survival depended on convincing the emperor that the illusion was complete. And he did. Ancient accounts say Sporus became adept at this role, anticipating Nero's moods, responding to his fantasies, and maintaining the fiction. But the cost was immense. He lived in rooms decorated for Poppaea. He wore her jewels, mimicked her smile, and listened as Nero called him by her name. Piece by piece, his true self was erased. For 2 years, Sporus endured this existence, even traveling with Nero to Greece where the emperor performed in festivals. To foreign dignitaries, Sporus was presented as Rome's empress. Imagine the bewilderment of Greek aristocrats forced to play along with a fiction that was both obvious and disturbing. But in 68 A.D., the empire had enough. Nero's extravagance and neglect of governance sparked rebellion. The Senate declared him an enemy of the state. The Praetorian Guard turned against him. Nero fled the city with only a handful of loyalists, Sporus among them. Even in the face of death, the emperor clung to his living illusion of Poppaea. When capture became inevitable, Nero chose suicide. His death marked the end of his reign, but for Sporus it was not freedom. Instead, he became a possession passed between powerful men. Each new master, Sabinus, Otho, Vitellius, forced him to continue the role Nero had created. He was still dressed as Poppaea, still treated as a grotesque symbol of imperial decadence. Under Vitellius, his ordeal reached its final, tragic end. The emperor planned to use sporbing. But in 68 A.D., the empire had enough. Nero's extravagance and neglect of governance sparked rebellion. The Senate declared him an enemy of the state. The Praetorian Guard turned against him. Nero fled the city with only a handful of loyalists, Sporus among them. Even in the face of death, the emperor clung to his living illusion of Poppaea. When capture became inevitable, Nero chose suicide. His death marked the end of his reign, but for Sporus it was not freedom. Passed between powerful men. Each new master, Sabinus, Otho, Vitellius, forced him to continue the role Nero had created. He was still dressed as Poppaea, still treated as a grotesque symbol of imperial decadence. Under Vitellius, his ordeal reached its final, tragic end. The emperor planned to use Sporus in the arena, humiliating him in a public performance designed for the masses' amusement. Faced with this ultimate degradation, Sporus made the only choice that was truly his own. He took his own life, likely by poison, ending his suffering at no more than 20 years old. Sporus' story is one of cruelty, power, and loss. Writers remembered him only as a symbol of Nero's madness, but behind their accounts was a young man whose identity, dreams, and dignity was stripped away. His final act, choosing death over further humiliation, was a tragic but powerful reminder that even in the face of absolute power, the human will to reclaim agency can still endure. 2,000 years later, his story remains chilling. It forces us to see beyond the grandeur of empire. Remember the human cost hidden beneath its marble and gold. Sporus was not just Nero's victim. Sporus was not just Nero's victim. He was a person erased by obsession, but not forgotten. The story stands as both a warning and a testament to resilience. The resilience to choose dignity, even in the darkest of circumstances.